Absolutely. Here's a asterisk asterisk, deep, compelling, and convicting opening asterisk asterisk in the asterisk asterisk style of Tony Evans asterisk asterisk, crafted to asterisk asterisk grab the audience's attention asterisk asterisk and persuade them to asterisk asterisk listen all the way through asterisk asterisk. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a treasure so valuable, so powerful, so life-changing, that if you ever truly laid hold of it, money wouldn't impress you, success wouldn't control you, and fear wouldn't intimidate you. I'm talking about a treasure that can't be stored in banks, can't be measured in dollars, and can't be stolen by thieves. I'm talking about a spiritual treasure, a heavenly inheritance, a divine deposit that's available, but most folks are too busy chasing counterfeit riches to even notice it. You see, we live in a world that's mastered the art of distraction. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to keep you busy chasing things that don't matter. And while you're running after promotions, possessions, and popularity, you're passing right by the very thing that could set your soul on fire and shift your whole destiny. That's why I came to tell somebody today there's something more, something deeper, something eternal, something that surpasses all wealth. Because what good is a full wallet and an empty heart? What good is having followers on earth and no favor in heaven? What good is stacking up riches, but you're bankrupt when it comes to peace, purpose, and power? No, we're going somewhere today. We're about to dig beneath the surface because the surface won't satisfy anymore. I need you to lean in not just with your ears, but with your spirit. Because if you catch what God is saying in this moment, if you truly receive it, you won't leave this message the same. You're about to discover that the greatest riches you could ever possess have nothing to do with what's in your hands, and everything to do with what's in your heart. So don't just listen and gauge. Don't just hear receive. Don't just sit through this. Let this sit in you. Because God is ready to unlock a treasure in your life that surpasses anything this world could ever give you. Let's go deeper. You see, the reason so many people miss the spiritual treasure is because they don't recognize its value. We've been trained to measure worth by what we can see, touch, count, and control. If it's not in our bank account, if it doesn't make headlines, if it doesn't bring applause, we think it's not worth much. But the kingdom of God doesn't operate like that. What the world deems valuable, God often calls vanity. And what the world ignores, heaven sees as priceless. That's why so many folks walk past the presence of God like it's ordinary, when it's the most extraordinary thing they could ever encounter. See, when we talk about spiritual treasure, we're not talking about just some vague feeling or religious idea. We're talking about the living presence of the Most High God taking residence in your life. That's treasure. That's the pearl of great price. That's the field worth selling everything to buy. Because when you have Him, you don't just have a blessing. You have the source of all blessings. You have access to wisdom when you're confused, peace when you're surrounded by chaos, and strength when you're weak and worn out. You have the one who spoke the universe into being walking with you in the middle of your mess. But here's the problem. We want what God can give, but we don't always want God Himself. We want the benefits of heaven without the burden of surrender, and so we settle. We settle for shallow Christianity, empty rituals, and external success, while our souls quietly starve. But if we're ever going to uncover the treasure that truly satisfies, we've got to shift our value system. We've got to realize that God's presence isn't a side dish. It's the whole meal. He's not the bonus. He is the blessing. Think about Moses. He had access to power, to royalty, to privilege. He could have stayed in Pharaoh's house and lived comfortably. But he said, "If your presence doesn't go with me, I don't want to go." In other words, I'd rather have you in the wilderness than live in a palace without you. That's the kind of perspective that sees the value of divine presence. That's the kind of heart God can fill. Now, let me make it real plain when you recognize the presence of God as your treasure. It changes the way you live. It changes what you pursue. You stop chasing applause and start chasing alignment. You stop comparing yourself to others because you realize that no one can compete with what you carry. You carry glory, you carry purpose, you carry the Spirit of the living God. That's not religion, that's not hype. That's not emotion, that's truth. And when that truth gets down in your soul, you start walking differently. You pray differently. You show up to battles with confidence because you know you're not fighting alone. See, some of us are walking around defeated not because the enemy is so strong, but because we've forgotten who's walking with us. We've forgotten that the treasure isn't what we're trying to earn. It's what we already have if we're in Christ. We've got the King of Kings residing in us, and yet we let anxiety rule. We let depression speak louder than his promises. We let culture dictate our worth, forgetting that heaven already declared us priceless. But when you wake up in the morning and you remember, I have him, you stop living like you're lacking. You stop living like a beggar and start living like an heir. Because the presence of God is not just a Sunday morning experience. It's a daily reality for those who seek him. And the more you draw near, the more you begin to see that nothing compares, not fame, not money, not comfort. Because all of that can be taken, but his presence remains. So today, if you've been feeling empty, if you've been running on fumes, if you've been searching for something to satisfy the ache in your soul, stop looking out there and start looking within. The treasure is already near. The invitation is already open. God is not hiding from you. He's waiting to be pursued. And when you pursue him for who he is, not just for what he can do, that's when you'll uncover the spiritual treasure that surpasses all wealth. That's when everything changes. One of the biggest challenges we face in this life is learning to let go of what looks good now for the sake of what's far greater later. It's not easy. We've been conditioned to grab what we can when we can and hold on tight. The world tells you to chase the bag, secure the deal, build the brand, get the house, climb the ladder. And listen, none of those things are wrong in themselves, but the danger is when those things become your treasure. When your worth gets tangled up in your wealth, when your identity becomes chained to your income, that's when you've traded eternal glory for temporary gain, and that's a bad trade every time. Because here's what we don't like to talk about: everything this world offers will one day fade. Your money, your title, your social status, your possessions. They don't follow you into eternity. They don't give your soul peace. They don't heal broken hearts. They don't silence the voice of guilt at night. Only one thing lasts. Only one thing satisfies. Only one thing carries weight in both time and eternity. And that's what you did with the spiritual treasure God offered you. Jesus said something so piercing, so unforgettable, that it ought to make us stop and evaluate everything we're living for. He said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" Think about that. You could win the race, dominate the market, become a household name, and still be broke in the only economy that matters. You could be applauded by the crowd and rejected by heaven, because heaven doesn't measure success the way earth does. Down here, they check your bank account. Up there, they check your heart, and I get it. It's hard to let go of things that feel so immediate, so rewarding, so tangible. It's hard to say no to a shortcut when it looks like everybody else is taking it and winning. It's hard to trust God's timing when your flesh is screaming for results right now. But when you live with eternity in mind, you realize that obedience is always more valuable than applause. Purpose is always better than popularity, and favor with God is worth more than fame with men. This is why we've got to be intentional about what we're investing in. Are you pouring all your energy, your creativity, your passion into building something that'll rust, rot, or fade? Or are you investing in the kingdom of God, where the returns are eternal and the dividends don't dry up? Because God's economy works different. The more you give, the more you gain. The more you surrender, the more you're strengthened. The more you lose for His sake, the more you find life that can't be taken away. See, when you really believe that spiritual treasure is greater than material wealth, it changes the way you make decisions. You'll say no to opportunities that look good but don't align with God's will. You'll walk away from relationships that pull you away from purpose. You'll give generously, not because you have extra, but because you know the real reward doesn't come from people. It comes from heaven. You'll suffer for righteousness and still smile because you know God sees, and He's keeping score. Let me be real with you. Sometimes following God means walking away from things that used to define you. It means laying down comfort, popularity, even relationships, to chase something greater. And yes, it may look like loss on the surface. It may feel like you're falling behind, but God never asks you to give up something without having something better in store. Not always richer, not always flashier, but always deeper, always stronger, always eternal. Don't get distracted by the glitter of the world and miss the glory of God. Don't trade your destiny for $1. Don't sell your inheritance for a moment of pleasure or applause or gain, because the moment will pass, but what God gives will remain. So if you find yourself at a crossroads today, torn between chasing the world and following the Spirit, choose the path that leads to life. Choose the treasure that doesn't fade. Choose the glory that can't be bought. Because when it's all said and done and everything else has crumbled, only what you did for God will matter. Only His presence, His purpose, and His kingdom will stand. That's the kind of wealth worth living for. You don't find treasure lying on the surface. You've got to dig for it. You've got to go beneath the surface of comfort, beneath the surface of convenience, beneath the surface of what's easy and predictable. That's where the real treasure is buried, and I'm not talking about diamonds or gold. I'm talking about the kind of treasure that transforms your soul, the kind that gives you a foundation when life starts shaking, the kind that strengthens your faith when you're surrounded by fear. But let me tell you this, it doesn't come cheap. It costs something. It'll cost you your pride, It'll cost you your control. It'll cost you the illusion that you've got it all figured out, because spiritual treasure is uncovered not through effort alone, but through surrender. And that's where most people get stuck. They want the reward without the release. They want the fruit without planting the seed. But you cannot dig into the depths of what God has for you while holding on to everything the world says you need. At some point, you've got to drop the shovel of self-reliance and pick up the posture of trust. You've got to get low so He can lift you high. You've got to let go so He can fill you. You've got to stop digging in the wrong field and let God guide you to where the true treasure is hidden, in Him. Some of the deepest treasures of heaven are found in the hardest seasons of life. You don't learn to pray when everything's perfect. You learn to pray when the walls are closing in. You don't discover peace when the road is smooth. You find it when the storm is raging and somehow your soul is still anchored. You don't grow in strength by avoiding struggle. You grow when you're weak and you say, "Lord, I can't." But you can. That's when something shifts. That's when the digging gets real. Because now it's not about surface religion. It's about relationship. It's not about looking holy. It's about being whole. And I want you to hear me on this. God is not hiding His treasure to keep it from you. He's hiding it so you'll seek Him, because the seeking is part of the shaping. He knows that if you could just grab the treasure without the process, you wouldn't be ready to carry it. You treat it like just another blessing to brag about. But when you've been through the fire, when you've had to cry and crawl and worship through the pain, when you've had to press through rejection, loss, and delay, when you finally get to that place of breakthrough, you don't treat it lightly. You know the cost, you've been refined, and you've been prepared to handle what He's given. That's why digging deep through surrender and trust isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When you choose to trust God with the places you can't control, you give Him room to do what only He can do. And trust me, there are some breakthroughs you will never experience until you let go of the shovel and say, "God, I give it to you." That's when you move from striving to abiding. That's when you stop treating God like a vending machine and start walking with Him as your source, your Father, your treasure. You don't have to have all the answers, you just need the right posture. God's not looking for perfection. He's looking for surrender. He's not asking you to figure it all out. He's asking you to follow Him, to trust Him in the dark, to keep digging when nothing seems to be changing. Because faith isn't proven when it's easy. It's proven when you can't see what He's doing, but you trust who He is. So if you're in a season right now where it feels like you've been digging, but there's no treasure in sight, don't give up. Don't back down. You're not being buried. You're being planted, and in due time what's been hidden will be revealed. What's been silent will be shouted. What's been held back will be released. You just stay faithful. Keep surrendering, keep trusting, because what's beneath the surface is worth more than you can imagine. That's where the real treasure lies. When we talk about uncovering spiritual treasure, we're not talking about something abstract or untouchable. We're talking about something that transforms how you live right here, right now, because real treasure doesn't just change your eternity, it changes your everyday. And one of the clearest signs that you've tapped into that kind of treasure is when you start living rich in what truly matters. Not rich in possessions, not rich in status, but rich in grace, rich in wisdom, rich in truth, rich in love, rich in the things that heaven values even when the world overlooks them. You see, this world has a way of trying to define your value based on what you have. If you drive the right car, live in the right neighborhood, wear the right label, or know the right people, then you must be successful. But God measures wealth on a whole different scale. Heaven doesn't check your resume, it checks your character. It doesn't inspect your wardrobe, it inspects your worship. And until we shift from a worldly definition of wealth to a kingdom mindset, we'll keep chasing wind and wondering why our souls still feel empty. Living rich in what matters means you stop letting culture set the terms for your worth. You realize that a generous heart is more valuable than a padded bank account. You begin to understand that integrity in private holds more weight than influence in public. That pouring into your family, your purpose, and your faith leaves a legacy money could never buy. And suddenly, what used to impress you doesn't matter like it did before, because now you're rich in peace, rich in purpose, and rich in the presence of God. There's something powerful about knowing who you are and what you carry. When you understand that you've got treasure inside of you, you stop begging for approval. You stop bending to pressure. You stop trying to fit into systems God called you to transform. You become content, not because life is perfect, but because your spirit is anchored in something unshakable. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. And let me tell you something people will notice. When you live rich in what truly matters, it shows. Your joy doesn't come from circumstances, but from your connection to the source. Your generosity isn't tied to excess. It flows from obedience. You treat people with compassion, not to gain clout, but because you understand what it means to be loved by God. You speak truth even when it's costly because you value righteousness over reputation. That's what spiritual wealth looks like. Quiet strength, holy confidence, godly contentment. Don't you know that some of the richest people in the eyes of heaven would never make it onto a magazine cover? They're the ones who wake up and pray over their children, who give when no one's watching, who serve when they're tired, who forgive when it hurts. They've been through the fire and didn't quit. They've been overlooked but stayed faithful. That's the kind of wealth that matters. That's the kind of treasure that shines in the eyes of God. And here's the beautiful part. It's available to you. This treasure isn't reserved for the elite, the educated, or the powerful. It's for anyone willing to seek God and walk in obedience. Anyone willing to store up treasure in heaven instead of clinging to treasure on earth. Because when you live for the eternal, your life gains eternal value. Now, that doesn't mean you won't face pressure. The world will try to pull you back into its system, try to convince you that you're missing out. But when you've tasted true spiritual treasure, you know better. You know the peace that passes understanding, the joy that doesn't fluctuate, the power that sustains you through every storm. That kind of wealth is unshakable, so I came to remind somebody you're richer than you think. If you've got Jesus, if you've got truth, if you've got purpose and the Spirit of God dwelling in you, then you've got more than this world could ever offer. And if you'll start living like that, if you'll walk in it, believe it, and carry it, you'll stop chasing treasure and start becoming the vessel that carries it. That's when your life becomes evidence of the treasure that surpasses all wealth.